Well, I'm still slowly letting people in, but we can go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Kristen Sharp, and I am the Events Director for the Oro Valley Chamber of Commerce. We have our latest edition of Let's Connect today with County Supervisor Rex Scott. So without further ado, our President and CEO, Dave Perry.
Thank you, everybody. I'm in the home office, and Rex pointed out that I'm wearing a tie today for no obvious reason, but pleased to have Supervisor Rex Scott and members of his staff, and of course, always a pleasure to have all of you with us. I'll introduce Rex, and I've known Rex back to the days when I used to be a newspaper publisher and editor, and he was a letter writer, and got to know each other a little bit. He's a career educator. He spent time both at Flowing Wells as well as in the Amphi and at Ironwood Ridge High School, as well as Tortolita Middle School as a principal, assistant principal, and principal. He grew up in Athens, Ohio, and went to Ohio University. The Bobcats won, I believe, a first-round game in the men's basketball tournament. And interestingly to me, at the age of 24, he was elected to the Athens City Council, Athens, Ohio, becoming the first Ohio University student to serve on that governing board. Rex ran for Pima County Supervisor this last fall and was elected in 2020. He took office in 2021 at the start of the year, and I'm sure he's having a terrific experience that he's going to share with us. So Rex is going to begin with a PowerPoint, and then we'll go to your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a virtual applause for Supervisor Rex Scott?
Dave, thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here with Oro Valley Chamber members, and I appreciate you mentioning the time that I spent at Ironwood Ridge. I was an assistant principal there from 2004 till 2009, and there is a big part of my heart that will always be a Nighthawk, and it's good to see some parents of former students on the call today. Also appreciate, Dave, that you mentioned Ohio University's first round performance in the March Madness tournament, where they did defeat the University of Virginia, the 2019 champions. Very gracious of you not to mention our performance in the second round when we were pretty much schooled by the Creighton Blue Jays and sent back home to Athens. So I do have one of my staff members who is going to be running our PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to allow the bulk of our time to respond to any and all questions that you may have. So Kim, if you could start sharing your screen, and we'll start going through this presentation. All right. So go ahead, Kim, and go to the first slide. There we go. First of all, before I get into the content of this slide, I have been a Pima County resident since 1991. As Dave said, moved here from my hometown of Athens, Ohio. I followed a girl out here. It wasn't the girl that I ended up with, but that is another PowerPoint entirely. And was very blessed to meet the woman that I married a few months after I moved here. We've been married since 1994. Her name is Terry. She's a second grade teacher in the Flowing Wells district. Our daughter, we have 26-year-old twins. They just turned 26 on St. Patrick's Day, in fact. And our daughter, Caitlin, followed us into the profession. She is a third grade teacher at Rattlesnake Ridge Elementary School in the Marana district. Our son, Trent, would no sooner work in education than he would jump off a bridge. And he is a manager at a store on 4th Avenue that some of you may be familiar with, Hippie Gypsy. So if you ever go into Hippie Gypsy and you see this guy with really long hair who kind of looks like your county supervisor, that's my kid. And moved here to take a teaching job at Flowing Wells Junior High School, also taught at Gridley Middle School, and then I was an assistant principal or principal at 5 different middle and high schools, assistant principal at Doolin Middle School, principal at Howenstein High School, as we already said, assistant principal at Ironwood Ridge, principal at Catalina High School in TUSD, and then principal at Tortolita Middle School in the Marana district. The 3.5 years that I was a city councilman in Athens, Ohio, counted as other public service under the Arizona State Retirement System rules. I bought those years back around 2010, and that's the reason I was able to retire in 2019. Quickly demonstrated that I'm an utter failure at being a retiree because I announced for this seat and was elected in November of 2020. I'm really proud to be the first Democrat to represent District 1 since 1972. It is the only purple district among the 5. There's about 3,500 more Republicans than Democrats in our district, and there's also a sizable block of independents. As for this first slide, the first bullet deals with the roles of the Board of Supervisors, because I find that even a lot of people who follow local government don't really know what the Board of Supervisors does. And the Board of Supervisors is the, if you go back to your high school government class knowledge, we are both the executive and legislative body that oversees Pima County government. We can pass ordinances, also known as laws, but our most important role is to oversee the operations of Pima County government. And Pima County has over 1 million people. It's the second largest county in the state of Arizona, second out of 15. And we hire a county administrator to deal with the day-to-day operations of county government, but it's the responsibility of the board to give direction to the county administrator and all of the department heads to ensure that all of the services and supports that Pima County residents depend on are delivered with the highest level of constituent service, equity, and respect for the public revenues entrusted to us. We set the budgets for all departments, including the departments that are run by what are known as the row officers, independently elected officials such as the sheriff, county attorney, county recorder, and others. We set their budgets, although they are responsible for running their departments. The duties of supervisors speak to why I ran for the office in the first place. Over a 19-year career as a school administrator, I was responsible for making sure that the services and supports that our students and their families relied on were delivered with the highest level of constituent service, equity, and respect for the tax dollars entrusted to us. So I saw a lot of parallels between what I've been doing for 19 years and what we expect of supervisors. But to get to that third bullet, campaign topics versus reality. It's interesting when you're going through a campaign for county supervisor and you're in forums with your primary and general election opponents, you're interviewed by the media, you get questions from voters. Those questions often deal more with areas of interest, issues, if you will. The reality of the job is that my 3-person staff and I spend the abundance of our time dealing with constituent service, helping the residents of District 1 to find out which departments in the county can best address the needs or questions or concerns that they bring to us. And we'll get into some of those topics in more depth as we go on. Go to the next slide, please, Kim. We do, however, have some issues of interest that we are really focused on in the District 1 office. You might have seen that I put a proposal on the February 16th board agenda that directed the county administrator and staff to include $10 million in our next budget to provide scholarships for quality early childhood education experiences to children from low-income families. And we're doing this not just as an education measure. There's just tons of research that indicates the importance in terms of kindergarten readiness and brain development for every child to have this, this benefit of early childhood education. And we don't think that family income should be a barrier to that. If it is, then that's another generation of children who might be consigned to poverty. But we also see this as an economic development measure. It's part of our demonstration of having a robust pre-K through higher ed education system in Pima County. That's a big reason why business partners like the Greater Tucson Metro Chamber of Commerce and the Southern Arizona Leadership Council have gotten behind the push for the county to take a leadership role in increasing access to early childhood education. We live in District 1, so transportation is also a big focus for our office. By Pima County's own measurement, 70% of the roads in unincorporated Pima County, the roads that the county is responsible for, are in poor or failed condition. That's unacceptable. And the previous board in November of 2019 passed a policy that created a program called PAYGO. And PAYGO uses a blend of state and local funding to focus on getting all of those local and arterial and collector roads in unincorporated Pima County up to par by 2030. There's a different program for local or neighborhood roads than there is for arterial and collector roads, but they both rely on the same sources of funding. We are putting a measure on the April 6th Board of Supervisors agenda to infuse an additional $50 million into that program next year. That will allow the Transportation Department to address 130 extra miles of roads in unincorporated Pima County beyond what they were already budgeted for. And my commitment is to always look for ways to accelerate that program. Affordable housing is also a big issue of concern for us. There are too many families in Pima County who pay more than 30% of their budget each month towards housing. So we need to be working with the other jurisdictions and with our private sector partners to increase the stock of affordable housing within Pima County. Go ahead to the next slide, Kim. These are the boundaries for District 1. We are one of 5 supervisorial districts. The rough lines of demarcation are River Road to the south, Catalina Highway to the east, the Pinal County line to the north, and I-10 to the west, although you will see that there are some areas west of I-10 that are in the district. These lines may change because just like the congressional and legislative districts, as soon as we get the census data, which has been delayed, the county will be responsible for revising not just the district lines for the Board of Supervisors, but also for the justices of the peace and the overall precinct boundaries. So that's something you'll be hearing more about as we get into the late summer, early fall of this year. Go ahead to the next slide, please, Kim. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about county revenue sources. We are responsible as a board for setting the tax rates for 4 different taxes. Of course, the primary property tax is the most well-known. The secondary property taxes, there's 3 of them. One of them funds our long-term debt service. The second funds the flood control district. The third funds the library district. Interestingly, the property taxes that we fund provide less than 40% of the revenues that help to fund county operations. The rest of that comes from a small number of fees, but the bulk of it comes from state shared revenues. Our share of the sales tax, vehicle license tax, gas tax, and so on. Go ahead to the next slide, Kim. As I said earlier, our biggest responsibility on a day-to-day basis is addressing constituent requests. And although we've been really impressed with all of the departments under Pima County government in terms of their dedication, knowledge, and responsiveness. These are the 4 departments that we work with the most in alphabetical order. Development Services is responsible for overseeing planning, zoning, land use issues. If you're interested in expanding or locating a business, you work with Development Services. I'm really impressed with the fact that a business can make a request for permitting or other needs to Development Services, and their response time is that they will meet those needs within 3 to 5 days. They operate in the same building as the city's Department for Development Services, and our department staff has been helping the city during this pandemic to deal with the backlog of business that they have gotten. So they're also a great partner with the city of Tucson. Also, if there are zoning disputes or questions, they have people who deal with that. We recently had somebody contact us about a zoning dispute they were having with their neighbor. An inspector from the department went out there and was able to provide current and accurate information and direction to both the person who complained to us and his neighbor. Obviously, given the global health crisis that we are in, the health department is probably the department that we hear from the most and that we interact with the most. And beyond being responsible for all of our pandemic response, because counties are, under Arizona state law, the public health authorities in their areas. And obviously vaccine allocation has been the biggest role for the health department. We have set up 5 points of distribution and are also using mobile vaccination clinics to get into underserved neighborhoods with minority and low income residents. We have given close to 500,000 immunizations, and we are always looking to expand the number of shots that we're able to give each day. That has mostly been a supply issue. We have the capacity to immunize close to 8,000 people a day, but we've never gotten enough vaccine from our state allocation to immunize more than 6,000 a day. So supply is the biggest issue for us, not capacity. There's a phone team within the health department that if people, especially older people, have difficulty navigating the website or don't want to call the call center, there's a phone team. And that's a team that we've utilized when people have called our office frustrated with the logistics of the system. That phone team makes direct contact with them and can get them a vaccine appointment usually the same day. Unincorporated Pima County, if it were a city, would be the 4th or 5th largest city in the state of Arizona. So we are the only county that operates a municipal park system. And there are dozens of parks and trailheads, and obviously the Huckleberry Loop that are overseen by Natural Resources Parks and Recreation. Athletic fields are also their responsibility. Dog parks, we recently reopened the athletic fields to league and tournament play. And this department is also terrific about getting back to constituents with questions or concerns. Again, because of the road situation in District 1, we get a lot of calls about particular roads, current issues with them, questions about when they're going to be part of the pavement preservation program. And we've been just as impressed with the transportation department staff in terms of their ability to get back to people as we have been with the other departments. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Kim. Just wanted to share this website with you, and I'm glad that Kristen will be sharing the PowerPoint with all of you so you can have the link. This is the web page for all of the information from the local health department about the COVID-19 pandemic, our response to it, and all the important information about vaccines. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Kim. If you go to this website, you will see these links on the Transportation Department website. You can go to report a problem and report a particular issue with a specific road, and that will be put into the C-Click-Fix system, and you will be given regular emails on the progress of dealing with the problem that you reported. You can also look at links like projects, roadway maintenance, planning and funding to see the overall scope of the PAYGO program that I talked about earlier. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Kim. This is my wonderful, wonderful team. And I'm just so blessed to be working with such a talented and dedicated group of people. Cammie Evans has been working for the county for about 16 years, and all of her experience has been in the Sheriff's Department. She worked under Sheriff Dupnik, Sheriff Nanos, and then for the 4 years prior to the 2020 election, she was the administrative assistant for Sheriff Napier. And Cammie also has a great deal of experience in the communications field in the private sector. Kate Hiller has been working in our community in the nonprofit sector for many years. She has worked for Primavera, Mobile Meals, Emerge Center for Domestic Violence, Child and Family Resources. She was part of the campaign for the open space bonds that helped to support the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. So really happy to have her expertise and contacts in the community working on behalf of the folks in District 1. And then Kim Challender, who is helping with our PowerPoint presentation today. Kim is also a county employee. She spent 6 years, I believe, in the county recorder's office, including a stint as one of the deputy recorders. And Kim also has a lot of marketing experience from the private sector. You can see our email address at the bottom, and that's a way of getting a hold of all four of us. But Kim, please go to the next slide and I'll share the other contact information. This is our office phone number, email address, website. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm either not cool enough or not young enough, probably both, to have an Instagram, but we do have those forms of social media. I was very fortunate to work with a wonderful woman named Susan Curtis when I was the principal at Catalina High School in TUSD. And Susan had this great saying. She was our dropout prevention coordinator, our homeless liaison, because we had a significant number of homeless kids at Catalina. She worked with the community to keep our food and clothing banks fully stocked. And every time I would ask Susan, I would thank Susan, I'm sorry, for the work that she did, she would always respond with the same line, Mr. Scott, it's a blessing to serve. And that is the way the four of us feel about working on behalf of everybody in District 1. So we hope that you will contact all of us, any of us, anytime there's something that we can do to be of service or support. And with that, Dave and Kristen, I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
Thank you, Rex. And please chat your questions in the chat at the bottom of the screen there to Kristen, and I will ask questions on behalf of you all. I want to acknowledge a special guest on the call that I see, and that is Jeff McClure. Jeff McClure is better known as Mr. Barbara McClure, Barbara being dynamic leader of Impact of Southern Arizona, but newly elected to the Pinal County Board of Supervisors, providing representation for the communities north of Catalina and beyond on that Pinal board. And Jeff, it's great to see your mugshot out there and have you join us today. Rex,
and Dave, I had a great phone conversation recently with Jeff. He was kind enough to reach out to me, and we talked for about 30 minutes about problems common to our area, and we're hoping that as soon as local conditions for the pandemic allow it, that we can meet personally, and we'll look for opportunities for our offices to work together.
Thank you. Rex, I want to start. You wrote a piece that ran in the Daily Star this morning about a proposal from Tucson Water to increase rates for people who live, as I understand it, outside the city of Tucson. And I know Tucson Water reaches pretty far up into the northwest side here. Can you sort of put a number on that? How many people might be affected by this proposal and where they might live?
The only people who will be affected by this proposal, Dave, are people who live in unincorporated Pima County. And the majority of people who will be affected live in District 1. There's people who live in the other districts who will be affected, but it's mostly District 1 residents who will bear the brunt of these differential water rates. And if you live in another incorporated jurisdiction, you aren't affected by this, which is another reason why we feel that it's extraordinarily inequitable. About 34% of Tucson Water's customers live outside the boundaries of the city of Tucson. And as I said in the column, we have been functioning in tandem with the city since the 1970s, them as the regional water provider, us as the regional sewer provider. We don't charge different sewer rates to people who live in the city of Tucson, even though the city of Tucson gets a lot of benefits from that relationship, but they are discussing charging differential water rates only to people who live in unincorporated Pima County. So the column that you reference cited a lot of the reasons why we feel that it's inequitable and also interferes with that balanced relationship that we've had with the city dating back to the 1970s.
So what should those people do if they want to raise their voice about it, Rex?
They need to contact Mayor Romero and the members of Tucson City Council, because they are going to be voting on this in early April, April 6th to be exact. That same day, the Board of Supervisors has its next meeting, and I have a resolution calling for the city to not adopt these differential water rates. My understanding of their process is that in April, they'll be voting on their intent. They then will have public hearings, so they could go back and reverse any decision that they make in April, but that April vote would be the first step for indicating what their plans might be.
Thank you. Rex, I want to talk about money, budget, pandemic, all of those things tied together. And let's start with the pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted both county expenditures and county revenues as you get some federal money that gets shared from the state?
You know, we've been more fortunate than we thought we would be in terms of the impact on revenues, both local property taxes and state shared revenues. There was great concern back when the pandemic started that the impact, especially on our state shared revenues, was going to be significant. So far, that has not been the case. We also are really pleased that the recently passed American Rescue Act includes direct aid to municipal governments that is going to help us to deal with some of the costs that we have borne out of our general fund for responding to the pandemic. We've also had some really sincere frustrations with the state of Arizona in terms of how they have gotten federal money that has been given to them to direct to local governments, how slow they've been at getting that out to counties and cities. They were given $416 million in December as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act that was passed in the lame duck session of Congress in December for testing, $64 million for vaccinations, and they've only distributed $100 million of that. I am the county's representative to the County Supervisors Association, the body that represents all 15 boards of supervisors, and I can tell you that all of our colleagues around the state are frustrated with how long it has taken for the state to get this money out to the counties, which, as I said, are by state law the public health authorities for their areas.
Thank you. So let's go a little bit. You mentioned the possibility of budgeting money for early childhood education, $10 million. And then I believe it was $50 million for roads, which would be appreciated, of course, but do we have that kind of money? Is that
We do. The 10 million is a pretty small amount when you consider that the county's budget for this past year was $1.5 billion. Having said that, we are going to be working with our partners in the private sector, the charitable sector, and also the other jurisdictions to ensure that we can get more contributions from everybody who has a stake in seeing access to quality early childhood education increase. There is a potential for additional revenue down the road because of some state legislation that we're pursuing. I'm not ready to comment on that at this point because the legislative session is still underway, but that may give us some leverage as well. The 50 million is going to be funded through what are known as certificates of participation. It's a form of short-term debt that has to be paid off within a 3 to 4 year period. That type of short-term debt is authorized under the policy, the PAYGO policy that was passed by the previous board in November 2019, but it will allow us to accelerate the program. And then we're going to continue to be looking at ways to use the funding that supports that program, the state funding that we get through the vehicle license tax and gas tax, but also the local funding, which comes mostly from the reductions in the secondary tax for debt service as we pay our long-term debt down, and the increases in local property value. The current board adopted a percentage where 60% of that reduction in the secondary debt service tax and 60% of the primary property tax value goes into the PAYGO program. The other 40% goes towards reducing the overall primary property tax rate.
You mentioned in your initial slide, Rex, affordable housing, accessible housing as an issue. And someone has asked, what should Pima County do to address the decreasing volume of accessible housing in the community? And I would add to that, do you consider that the county should develop and build what we describe as accessible housing?
I would not be an advocate for that, at least at this point. As I've been looking into other counties around the country that have been able to increase their stock of affordable housing, they've done it by establishing strong partnerships with the other jurisdictions in their areas, taking advantage of federal funds and federal grant opportunities, perhaps working with their states to craft tax incentives for developers, and then of course working with their private sector partners. This is much like early childhood education. This is not something that Pima County is going to be able to accomplish in and of itself. It's going to have to work closely with the other jurisdictions, as I said, perhaps also with state government, look at federal funds that are available, but also work with the private sector to create incentives for the development of affordable housing.
A related question, Rex. The city of Tucson is drafting regulations that would allow accessory dwelling units in residential areas as a way to increase housing inventory and presumably to make more affordable housing. Is that something Pima County should consider doing?
You know, I'm not familiar with that proposal that's being discussed within city government, but what I can tell you as somebody who spent his entire career in a field that focused on teaching and learning is that I'm always willing to listen to and learn from the examples of others, including other governments.
Appreciate that. Rex, you may know, probably, I'm sure you know, that the town of Oro Valley is looking at annexing the Westwood Look property from unincorporated Pima County. Do you have any thoughts or opinions about that?
You know, I have followed that closely because in the interim period between my election and my taking office, I was contacted by some of the people who live in the Westwood Look Heights neighborhood who would be part of this annexation. I know that they are expressing their views about building heights, building setbacks, traffic impacts, first to the Oro Valley Planning and Zoning Commission, and also now to Mayor Winfield and the members of Town Council. I hope that there is ultimately an annexation proposal that can allow the town of Oro Valley to get the extraordinary revenue boost that they would get from having the Westwood Look and its environs within the boundaries of the town of Oro Valley. But I also hope that the concerns of the neighbors in that neighborhood and some of the other adjacent neighborhoods can be taken into account and worked with to the extent practicable, since those people will become Oro Valley citizens if the annexation goes through.
Know, before we open the Zoom, Rex, you and I were talking about relationships with other governments, and you know, you've shared some of the frustrations with state government. Maybe you could elaborate on that, but I'd also be curious about the relations that you're trying to build with the town of Valley, the town of Marana, the city of Tucson.
You know, I've had terrific conversations with Mayor Romero and some of the members of Tucson City Council, some of whom that I've known for a long time. I'm going to be the county's representative to the Regional Transportation Authority and the Pima Association of Governments, which involves all of our local jurisdictions, as well as representatives from the Native American tribes that are in Pima County. In the coming month, April, I have meetings with representatives from Oro Valley Town Government, the mayor and the vice mayor, and also with the Marana mayor and the Marana town manager. So we are looking forward to always having productive and positive relationships with all of our partners in the district. About half of Marana is in District 1. The other half is in District 3. Of course, all of Oro Valley is in District 1. So is the town of Catalina. So are a lot of homeowners associations. So we're always going to be looking for ways to have dialogue and discussions, and hopefully more of them in person as we come out of the pandemic, with anybody that wants to talk with us or that needs our help.
Sure, appreciate that. Rex, what's been the 2.5 months in now, what's been the biggest surprise to you serving as a county supervisor?
The biggest surprise has been what I talked about on the first slide, the difference between what the campaign was focused on in terms of a real issue-oriented political campaign and the actual day-to-day work, which is very much focused on constituent service. I also don't feel like I've really gotten a sense yet of what it's going to be like to be the District 1 supervisor, because we took office when there was an extraordinary surge in coronavirus cases. So all of our board meetings since January have been conducted online. All of my meetings with community groups like this one are conducted online. I work mostly from home, spend the bulk of the day either in virtual meetings or on email or on the phone. So I'm really looking forward to getting out into the community and talking with people directly, going to community events and organization or meetings of organizations, and then I think I'll have a better sense of exactly what it's going to mean to be the District 1 supervisor. When I was a principal or assistant principal, the days that I enjoyed the most were the ones when I was out on campus, in the hallways, the cafeteria, the athletic fields, the classrooms, with the kids. The days that I enjoyed the least were the ones when I was mostly stuck in my office, and that's the way these first 2.5 months have felt, is have been more likely to be working from home than anything else.
Understood. Rex, let's talk about the pandemic. And, I hope we're all getting vaccinated. I got my first shot last week, and we see a pent-up interest in getting back out there, to your point, to having more gatherings. And of course, right now, the county is limiting the size of gatherings. And we have a fairly extensive application process if somebody wants to have a bigger gathering, for example. Are you going to lean toward getting things open and easing off on restrictions, and how will you make those decisions?
Dave, something that I felt really strongly back when the pandemic first hit our shores is that we as Americans would have dealt with a lot fewer cases, a lot fewer deaths. We lead the world in cases, we lead the world in deaths, even though we are the most affluent country in world history, and we had a pandemic response plan on the books that wasn't followed. So I have felt all along that if elected leaders had done more at the beginning to listen to public health experts, we wouldn't have dealt with all of the sadness and loss that we've been dealing with for the last year. So I'm not going to take any action as an elected official. And I felt this way throughout the campaign, and then since taking office in January. I'm not going to take any action unless the direction that I get from our public health experts at both the local, state, and also national level is as long as they give us the clearance. We have scaled back a lot of the local restrictions as the case count has gone down, but we've kept some things in place, notably the county mask mandate. And you may know that the governor chose not to put a statewide mask mandate in place, but he did give local governments the power to do that. And I believe every county and a great number of municipalities have put that in place. Once the governor, when he put out his order recently to remove capacity restrictions on restaurants and other businesses, said that social distancing and masking should remain in place. Once the governor lifts the public health emergency, that may be a signal to local governments to look at things like mask mandates. For now, I think we need to be focused on the incremental things that we can do, some of which were addressed by the governor's order that I just referenced, dealing with restaurants and businesses, things that the county has done, like, as I said earlier, opening up our athletic fields to league and tournament play. But the virus is still among us, and a variable that we have to be concerned about are the 3 variants from Great Britain, South Africa, and Brazil that we still know very little about. Also, we don't know a lot about the virus, the vaccine's ability to confront those variants. We cannot let our guard down, and we cannot let pandemic fatigue govern our actions. We need to be continuing to listen to public health and medical experts, and that's especially important for elected leaders like myself.
And I appreciate and understand all of that and respect that, Rex. Is there still, though, and this is my own sense as a guy who runs a business organization, do you hear from businesses, and do you understand the concerns that businesses have about reopening and having more people in their places? And while taking the proper precautions, they're heading into the heat of the season and that's when business is always slower. So my concern for businesses, we want to get you as viable as we can before the snowbirds and winter visitors are gone, and you got to tough it out until the fall. Is that a voice that you hear as you make decisions?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is listen to local businesses about what their greatest needs are, and then move to address those needs while also keeping in mind the needs to protect public health and safety. We're still learning about all of the components of the American Rescue Plan that was passed by Congress and signed by President Biden just a couple of weeks ago. I know that aid to businesses is part of that. I don't know yet how much of that will be funneled through the county or whether it's going to be funneled through the state. But I think we have to take quick action to get that money out if it's our responsibility to do so. It is our responsibility. It's also the responsibility of the state and the city of Tucson to get money that tenants and landlords need for rental relief out. We are currently working to distribute $15 million. That's the responsibility of the county. We're working in partnership with the city that actually has $19 million to get that out into the community, because the quickest way to, and the most effective way to ensure that there isn't a flood of evictions and people being homeless is to get that rental relief money out to the landlords and tenants that need it the most. And that is something that we are working very hard on, not just in partnership with the city, but also through a contract with the Community Investment Corporation that is also working with the city and county to dispense those funds.
Somebody's asked a great question. I wish I'd thought of this one. It's obvious, but you're a longtime educator, Rex, and we now see this week the reopening of schools across southern Arizona. What do you think about that broadly, specifically in terms of putting children back into the classroom?
Well, it's something that affects me personally because my wife is a second grade teacher and our daughter is a third grade teacher. And this is our daughter's first year in the classroom. And it's been a first year like no new teacher should have to experience. And the thing that she has wanted the most has been to be in the classroom with all of her kids. And just this week, she was able to enjoy that for the first time. My wife has been teaching since the early 90s. She will tell you that the year of the pandemic has been the most difficult of her career because of the challenges of remote instruction, hybrid instruction. I think one of the lessons that we are going to take from this pandemic is that we should have moved quicker as a nation, as a world, really, to reopen schools. And we were focused instead on getting, at least in the United States, on getting businesses reopened. And I think we've learned some things about not only how likely it is for kids to become infected, but how likely it is for them to be vectors. I think it was a good thing that both the federal and state governments put teachers and other school staff at the front of the line for vaccines. But I also think that it's really important that all of the school districts have the personal protective equipment, the ventilation, everything that they need to ensure a safe environment, because it's not just our children who are in these schools, it's also the people who work in the schools. But I think one of the lessons learned from the pandemic is that we should have been focused earlier on getting schools reopened. And the impact on children of this year of lost learning is significant. And I think other than the very old, who are of course the most susceptible to infection or death, the group most impacted by this pandemic has been our school kids, no question about it.
Yeah, and, and as the relation to that, I've been saying now for months that is normal, life feels normal, and so is business. You know, I think people go about their lives in a different way. Many people have, of course, young children or family members who work in schools, and this has been an unprecedented disruption. And that, of course, ripples out into society and business at large. We got a few more minutes, ladies and gentlemen, and this might be a question for staff, and it rolls into that area of constituent service. Do you have resources that could help somebody find out about the status of a federal check, perhaps from the IRS, perhaps a stimulus check? Is that something that you're being asked about and would be able to share information?
We are not being asked that, to my knowledge, but I do. But my daughter asked me about that this morning because you know, twins are always in competition with each other, Dave. And her brother has gotten his stimulus check, but she hasn't gotten hers. So there is a tool on the IRS website, which is irs.gov, where you can find out the status of your stimulus check, as well as your tax refund if you've already filed your taxes, although the deadline has been pushed from mid-April to mid-May.
Amazing time that we're living in, Rex, and here's your service to it. What's the biggest thing you've learned, the one thing you've learned as a new supervisor? Not a surprise, but more of a revelation about service.
It would be about service.
Okay. Or about this particular service.
It would be this, Dave. As long as I've lived in Pima County, and I've lived here for 30 years, the attitude that I've heard expressed about county government by most of the people I know is either I have no idea what the county does, or what I do know about, I'm not happy with it. And I've been extraordinarily impressed. So have Cammie, Kate, and Kim with what we have learned about the level of knowledge, dedication, responsiveness, commitment to constituent service by every member of every county department that we've interacted with. And so one of the things that I'm going to be doing during the 4 years, hopefully more than 4 years, that I'm the District 1 supervisor is making the people of District 1 aware of just what a blessing they have in the county workforce. These are terrific people. Again, they usually are able to resolve a constituent concern that we bring to them within the same day, certainly within 24 hours. And that to me has been a delightful revelation.
That's terrific. And we'll close on that note. Before we part, our next Let's Connect is on Thursday, April the 22nd. We're going to have as our guest Jennifer Schomburg. Jennifer Schomburg is the Chief Officer, I believe her title is now, at Oro Valley Hospital, and also serves in a similar role at Northwest Hospital. And then on April 29th, our guest is going to be Danette Bewley. And Danette is an Oro Valley resident who's also the CEO of the Tucson Airport Authority. And she's going to talk about things that are going on at the airport. Lastly, on May the 6th is our Bioscience Spotlight event. We're going to do a live and in-person event at the UA Center for Innovation, Oro Valley. And at the event, we're going to announce the recipient of a $10,000 business plan contest, a sponsored launch, which of the money is coming from our chamber to help pay for a year's tenancy for a business startup in the Oro Valley Center for Innovation. So really excited about that. We want to thank you all so much for being here today. And if you have follow-up questions or things you want to reach out to, please send us email or chat. I want to thanks to Kristen, all of you for being here, members of Rex's staff, and of course Rex himself. We're grateful for your time. Let's do this again in 6 months or so, Rex, and see how things have changed.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be meeting in person. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and please be in touch with our office if there's anything we can do for any of you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Have a great.
Thank you, everyone.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.